Dear colleagues, please take your seats. We are going to start now. I call the meeting of the General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions to order. Delegates are kindly requested to keep their headsets away from open microphones. Headsets placed too close to active microphones can cause high-pitched audio feedback, which is disruptive to both interpreters and participants. The speakers list for the first general debate closed 1 hour ago. However, please come to the podium and speak to the Secretariat if you would like to speak, and I will do my best to accommodate your request. Dear colleagues, the agenda for this meeting has been distributed. Could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections? I see no objections. The agenda is adopted. Now we move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the remarks by the Chair. Dear members, dear colleagues, dear friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the meeting of the General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions here in The Hague on the occasion of the 33rd annual session. As we have a full agenda over the coming days, I will keep my remarks brief. However, I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on the challenges that have shaped our committee's work, more broadly, the context in which we meet today. This reporting period has reinforced and accelerated trends that we have observed for too long: a growing disregard for international law, legally binding commitments, and the principles that have underpinned this organization for the past 50 years. What makes this moment particularly concerning is not only mounting violations of human rights norms and democratic principles we continue to witness across the OSCE region, but also the growing pressure on our organization itself. Political polarization, persistent deadlock, and increasing budget constraints are affecting the OSCE's capacities to respond effectively to today's challenges at the time when it is needed most. The consequences are both visible and deeply felt. As the war against Ukraine enters its 5th year, the human cost remains immense. Lives continue to be lost, civilians continue to suffer, and millions remain displaced. At the same time, we cannot ignore the crisis unfolding on the immediate borders of the OSCE region. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains extremely dire. Likewise, the outbreak of the Iran war earlier this year, together with the military operations in Lebanon, demonstrated once again how quickly instability can spread across an entire region and how severe the consequences are for civilian populations. These conflicts are not isolated from us. Their effects extend far beyond the immediate humanitarian impact, crossing borders and affecting regional and international security. Armed conflict, political instability, economic hardship, and environmental pressures continue to drive record levels of forced displacement, including within and around OSCE region. Millions of refugees, migrants, and forcibly displaced persons remain in need of protection and durable solutions, while states and communities face increasing pressure on their resources, institutions, and response capacities. At the same time, displacement and instability have contributed to an increase in trafficking in human beings, exploitation, and other forms of abuse. While armed conflict remains one of the gravest threats to human security, it is far from the only challenge confronting our region. Across parts of the OSCE area, the continued erosion of fundamental freedoms and democratic principles is evident in both conflict and non-conflict settings. Restrictions on freedom of expression, assembly and association, increasing pressure on independent media, and the intimidation of journalists, human rights defenders, and civil society actors reflect a broader trend of democratic backsliding. These concerns are also reflected in the growing challenges facing electoral processes. Electoral integrity is increasingly affected by weakened democratic institutions, restrictions on political pluralism, declining public confidence, as well as foreign interference, disinformation, and other hybrid threats. This is why we devoted particular attention to these issues during our special debate at the winter meeting in Vienna earlier this year. These are only some of the many interconnected challenges facing our region. Yet they come at a time when our organization itself is confronting significant political and financial constraints. The inability to convene the Human Dimension implementation meeting for more than 5 years due to a lack of consensus illustrates the political challenges facing the OSCE. At the same time, there have been some encouraging developments. The recent adoption of a unified budget after years of deadlock is a welcome achievement, and we commend the Swiss chairpersonship for its efforts in making this possible. However, the adopted budget also entails significant reductions that will inevitably affect the OSCE ability to implement its mandates, including in the human dimension, precisely when this work is needed most. Indeed, the need for the OSCE has not diminished, quite the opposite. Our autonomous institutions and field operations remain indispensable in promoting democracy, promoting human rights, supporting conflict prevention, and strengthening resilience across the region. But they cannot fulfill these responsibilities without adequate resources and sustained political support from participating states. Supporting these institutions is therefore not simply a budgetary matter, it is a shared political responsibility. This understanding has guided the work of our committee over the past year and must continue to guide our efforts in the future. It is reflected both in the report and draft resolution prepared by our rapporteur, Ms. Odebrink, which we will consider during our meeting here in The Hague, and in our continued efforts to strengthen cooperation with them, particularly ODIHR and the representative on freedom of the media. Through regular exchanges and joint initiatives, we have sought to reinforce the parliamentary contribution to the organization's work in the human dimension. Our joint election observation missions with ODIHR remain one of the clearest examples of this partnership, and many of you have contributed to these efforts. They continue to be among the Assembly's most visible contributions to promoting democratic standards, electoral integrity, and public confidence in democratic processes. Our cooperation has also included active participation in Human Dimension meetings, including the OSCE Human Dimension Conference in Warsaw, an important platform for dialogue among participating states, parliamentarians, civil society, human rights defenders, and independent experts. Beyond this cooperation, many members have also advanced the human dimension through Assembly's dedicated structures, including the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine, the Ad hoc Committees on Migration and Counting Terrorism, and the work of our special representatives on issues such as gender equality, youth participation, political prisoners, and combating discrimination. Together, these efforts demonstrate the continued relevance and added value of our Assembly in advancing the human dimension, while underscoring our shared responsibility to uphold the OSCE's principles and commitments. Yet, as parliamentarians of the 56 participating states, our responsibility extends beyond our work within the Assembly. We have a dual role: to strengthen the parliamentary dimension of the OSCE and, as members of our national parliaments, to ensure that our governments uphold their commitments to the organization and provide the political and financial support necessary for the OSCE to fulfill its mandate. Through our work at home, we must promote the value of multilateral cooperation, strengthen informed engagement with the OSCE, and help secure the political backing and resources required for this organization to remain effective. At a time when the challenges before us are more numerous, interconnected, and serious than at any point in recent years, we must keep this responsibility firmly in mind. Dear colleagues, before I conclude, I would like to congratulate our rapporteur, Ms. Odebrink, for her comprehensive draft resolution and thank her for the important work she has carried out for this committee. I would also like to thank all colleagues who have contributed through their amendments and continued engagement. Finally, on behalf of all of us, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our Dutch hosts for their warm hospitality and for welcoming us in The Hague. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to our discussion and the committee's discussion during this annual session. Let us now proceed to the next item on the agenda. And the next item on the agenda is opening remarks. Yes, we need to have the arrangements for the election of committee officers, which is where we had that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go through what we have to do in this committee this upcoming 3 days, and then we will come to the arrangement for the elections on committee officials. So the committee is scheduled to have 4 meetings during the session. Our first task will be to debate the report by our rapporteur, Ms. Odebrink, entitled International Law and Shared Principles, Foundations for Security and Cooperation in the OSCE Area. We will also consider amendments to her draft resolution. We have 25 amendments tabled to the draft resolution, which are available outside the room, on the documents table and on the app. In addition, this committee has been tasked by the Standing Committee to debate and consider 5 supplementary items covering the following issues: human trafficking and modern slavery, fostering dialogue and deepening cooperation across OSCE participating states, proposed by Baroness Rosie Winterton from the United Kingdom; upholding election integrity and fundamental freedoms in Georgia, proposed by Mr. Joe Wilson from the United States; ongoing war crimes against media workers and violations of the right during the Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine, proposed by Mr. Pascal Alizar from France; the situation in Belarus in the context of regional security, transnational repression and human rights, proposed by Mr. Bjorn Söder from Sweden; and the situation of national minorities and indigenous peoples in the Russian Federation, proposed by Mr. Ruslanas Baranovas from Lithuania. Amendments are available in the usual way and on the app. We will consider the supplementary items when our main business on the draft resolution is concluded. And now, let's move on agenda item number 3, which is arrangement for the election of committee officers. May I remind colleagues that the election of committee officers will take place during the committee's final session, which is scheduled to take place Tuesday, 7th of July at 11:30. I have been asked to put before the committee a proposal by the Secretariat for a change to the deadline for candidate nominations. This is to allow sufficient time for the arrangements for the election to be made ahead of our meeting on Tuesday. The same proposal is being put to all general committees. Under Rule 36, paragraph 5, the Secretariat would like to ask the committee to agree that the deadline for nominations for the committee officer shall be 6 p.m. on the afternoon of Monday, 6th of July, which is tomorrow. This is to allow sufficient time for the arrangements for elections to be made ahead of our meeting on Wednesday morning. Are there any objections to this proposal? I see no objections, then the proposal is adopted. So the deadline for the nominations for the officers is tomorrow, 6 p.m. And now we move on to the agenda item 4, presentation of the report and draft resolution by the rapporteur, Ms. Carina Odebrink. I would now like to welcome to the floor Ms. Odebrink to present her report and draft resolution to this committee. Thank you, Carina, for your hard work on the report and the resolution. Dear members, it would assist me greatly if any member wishing to add his or her name to the speakers list could come up to the podium as soon as possible. Mr. Odebrink, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Sargis, for your important opening remarks and for your warm words about me. And I also would like to thank the committee for giving me the trust to be a rapporteur for this year. It is a pleasure today to address as rapporteur of our General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions. Let me also begin by thanking our Dutch hosts for their warm hospitality and by thanking all colleagues for your engagement in my report and the many thoughtful amendments you have submitted. Since I was elected rapporteur in Bucharest 2024, I have followed developments across our region. Unfortunately, every year it becomes more difficult to conclude that we are moving in the right direction. We are witnessing the gradual erosion of the principles and commitments that have united this organization for 50 years. And let me be clear, dear colleagues, there can be no democracy without freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. These are not separate from security. They are the very foundation of security. When they are weakened, peace becomes more fragile, societies become less resilient, and it is ordinary people who pay the price. The first priority of my report is democracy and fundamental freedoms. Across our region and beyond, we see democratic backsliding. Institutions are weakened, electoral integrity is challenged, independent media and civil society face increasing pressure, and public trust is declining. I could list examples from North America, Europe, the South Caucasus, Central Asia, and elsewhere, but that is not my intention. Instead, I hope that every delegation, that every member here in the committee, we have to look ourselves in the mirror and ask us one simple question: am I and are we truly living up to the values and the commitments we have all agreed to uphold? The report also addresses the opportunities and risks created by artificial intelligence and online disinformation. Technology must strengthen democracy, not undermine it. My second priority is the protection of civilians in armed conflicts. Russia's war against Ukraine remains the gravest challenge to peace, security, and human rights in our region. The continued attacks on civilians and the unlawful deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children demand our unwavering attention. As Special Envoy on Ukrainian children, I remain committed to ensuring that this issue stays high on our agenda until every child has the opportunity to return home safely. And let me quote the word of Petra Bayer, president of the PACE, yesterday: "We need to hold the line and not soften it up." The resolution also recognized the immense humanitarian suffering caused by conflicts beyond the OSCE region, particularly in the Middle East. Wherever international law is ignored, civilians pay the highest price. And saying that, I also would like to say that I regret that the Standing Committee yesterday voted down the supplementary item on Palestine. The situation for the people in Palestine and the Middle East is close to the OSCE area, and democracy and human rights knows no boundaries. My report also highlights displacement, migration, human trafficking, equality, and non-discrimination. These are not separate issues. They are all questions of human dignity. Finally, I want to say a few words about the OSCE itself. Political deadlock and financial constraints have weakened our organization at precisely the moment when it is needed the most. Yet, the work of ODIHR, the representative of freedom of the media, the High Commissioner on National Minorities, and our field operations remains indispensable. If we want to defend democracy, we must also defend the institutions that protect it. Dear colleagues, as parliamentarians, we have a responsibility not only to reaffirm our commitments, but to live up to them. Let me conclude with one simple truth. Democracy, human rights, and security are inseparable. Without freedom, there is no democracy. Without democracy, there can be no lasting security. The people we represent expect more than words. They expect leadership, courage, and action. And thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to our discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina. Now the floor is open for debate. The time limit for speeches is 3 minutes. I may reduce the time limit if necessary to accommodate as many people as possible. The first speaker on the list is Ms. Valérie Debu from Belgium, followed by Mr. Marek Krajci from Slovak Republic. Ms. Debu, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je m'exprimerai en français. Je voudrais d'abord me joindre aux remerciements d'autres collègues à nos hôtes néerlandais pour leur accueil et remercier ici la collègue Eudebring pour son rapport et sa résolution. À l'heure où les tensions géopolitiques s'accentuent et où les conflits remettent en cause l'ordre international, il est essentiel que nos démocraties parlent d'une voix forte et cohérente. Le texte qui nous est soumis rappelle les principes de l'acte final d'Helsinki et de notre cadre commun dans l'espace de l'OSCE. Respect des droits de l'homme, des libertés fondamentales, de l'état de droit, de la souveraineté et de l'intégrité territoriale. Ces principes ne sont pas des formules diplomatiques abstraites. Ce sont les fondements concrets de notre sécurité et de notre coopération et donc de la liberté de nos citoyens. Nous voyons pourtant se multiplier les violations de ces engagements. Guerre d'agression et invasion à grande échelle de l'Ukraine par la Russie, recul démocratique en Géorgie, persistance de prisonniers politiques dans plusieurs États, déportation d'enfants ukrainiens, attaques contre des civils au Moyen-Orient. Chaque fois que le droit international est piétiné, ce sont des vies brisées, des sociétés fragilisées et c'est l'ensemble de notre ordre fondé sur des règles qui se fissurent. Ce projet de résolution rappelle justement que notre sécurité ne peut être dissociée de la protection des personnes les plus vulnérables. Femmes et filles confrontées aux violences sexistes, minorités, réfugiés, personnes LGBTQIA+, enfants victimes de déplacements forcés. Défendre leurs droits n'est pas une option morale parmi d'autres, c'est une condition pour des sociétés stables, inclusives et résilientes, capables de résister aux dérives autoritaires et au populisme qui prospèrent sur la peur et la division. La réponse ne peut être la résignation ni le relativisme. La réponse doit être la défense claire et ferme de l'état de droit, des institutions démocratiques, des libertés civiles et politiques, de la liberté de la presse et de la société civile. Ce projet de résolution le fait, en rappelant le rôle essentiel des parlements, contrôler les gouvernements, faire vivre le pluralisme, défendre aussi les oppositions, soutenir les institutions indépendantes de l'OSCE. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Marek Krajci, followed by Mr. Sergei Rachkov from Belarus. Mr. Krajci, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues. I thank the rapporteur, Ms. Karina Odebrink, for this resolution that captures many of the pressing challenges facing our region, from democratic backsliding to the protection of journalists, civil society, and vulnerable groups. Slovakia stands firmly behind the comprehensive concept of security this assembly was built to defend. However, this draft resolution requires amendments, mainly where it deals with the situation in the Middle East, the topic which falls outside of the scope of the OSCE as defined by our rules of procedure, and yet it does not address the related critical issue of the rising anti-Semitism across the OSCE era. The resolution rightly addresses the hostilities involving Iran, but fails to distinguish between the Iranian people and the regime, and completely omits the regime's role in fueling instability across the region, including through Hezbollah exporting this conflict into Lebanon. Regrettably, the text also stops short of expressing solidarity with the Iranian people in their struggle against the regime's oppression. Similarly, on Gaza, while the resolution addresses IDF operations, it omits Hamas's continued violations on the ceasefire, its refusal to disarm, and regrettably fails to condemn the heinous acts of abuse and sexual exploitation by Hamas against the very population it claims to represent. This is why my delegation proposed the amendments of the respective paragraphs. Finally, I take this opportunity to call on this committee to uphold the standards of impartiality and to ensure that our reporting remains impartial, fact-checked, and free of double standards. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Sergei Rachkov from Belarus, followed by Ms. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine. Mr. Rachkov, the floor is yours.
Господин председатель, гуманитарное измерение ОБСЕ задумывалось как пространство для укрепления доверия между государствами и народами, продвижения взаимопонимания и поиска объединяющих решений. Но сегодня мы вынуждены констатировать, что именно эта сфера все чаще становится ареной политического противостояния. За последние годы атмосфера сотрудничества в регионе ОБСЕ существенно ухудшилась. Санкции, ограничения контактов, разрыв профессиональных, образовательных, научных и культурных связей оказывают негативное влияние не только на межгосударственные отношения, но и на возможности прямого общения между людьми. Особую обеспокоенность вызывает практика применения двойных стандартов при оценке ситуации в различных государствах. Все чаще мы наблюдаем попытки делить страны на правильные и неправильные, использовать правозащитную тематику как инструмент политического давления и вмешательства во внутренние дела суверенных государств. В этих целях используется инициированная шведским парламентарием антибелорусская дополнительная резолюция, которая носит исключительно предвзятый и политизированный характер. Нет даже смысла разбирать ее постатейно, поскольку ее одиозные, местами оскорбительные формулировки и голословные обвинения не предполагают юридического анализа. Резолюция никоим образом не способствует конструктивному диалогу. Коллега из Швеции, обращаюсь к вам, переключитесь с Беларуси на страну, в которой вы живете, Швецию. Обеспокойтесь дискриминацией меньшинств, нарушением прав несовершеннолетних, ограничением доступа к социальным услугам в Швеции. Применяемые в отношении Беларуси политизированные подходы не способствуют укреплению авторитета ОБСЕ. Напротив, они подрывают доверие к нашим институтам и создают дополнительные барьеры для конструктивного взаимодействия. Беларусь убеждена, что права человека должны рассматриваться во всех их полноте и взаимосвязи. Речь идет не только о политических правах и свободах, но и о праве на труд, образование, медицинскую помощь, социальную защиту, сохранение культурной идентичности и достойный уровень жизни. Не менее важным остается вопрос борьбы с нетерпимостью, дискриминацией и попытками переписывания истории. Мы считаем недопустимыми любые формы героизации нацизма, оправдания военных преступлений и разрушения исторической памяти. Сохранение правды о трагических событиях прошлого является важным условием предотвращения новых конфликтов и укрепления взаимного уважения между народами. Благодарю вас.
The next speaker is Ms. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine, followed by Sir John Whittingdale from the United Kingdom. Ms. Gerashenko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. This resolution is not only about legal definitions. It is about people, Ukrainian children taken from their homes, civilian disappeareds and occupation, prisoners of war, torture in captivity, and survivors of sexual violence, including children. Russia's actions are systematic. The UN Commission has concluded that the deportation and forcible transfer of Ukrainian children, as well as the enforced disappearance amounts to crimes against humanity. The official Ukrainian data record 707 Ukrainian children killed and 2,600 wounded since 24 February 2022. Each number is a stolen lives, is destroy family, a crime that demand accountability. According to official Ukrainian data, over 20,000 children are registered as deported or forcibly displaced. 2,300 children remain missing, and only 2,200 have been returned. After the initiative, First Lady of USA, Melania Trump, 30 Ukrainian children returned, and thank you very much to all countries who support Ukraine to return Ukrainian children. Ukraine has opened 400 criminal cases concerning conflict-related sexual violence. The minimum recorded age of victims is 4 years old. This fact alone shows the cruelty to criminal nature of Russia's war against Ukraine's civilian population. Ukrainian prisoners of war and civilian detained are also victims of Russian deliberate policy. There have been 406 recorded deaths in captivity. Over 98% of those returned from Russia captivity tested to torture, inhuman terms, and systematic denial of medical care. Ukraine called on all OSCE participating states to support the Special Tribunal for the crimes of aggression against Ukraine and to ensure that leadership crimes are prosecuted. Reparation must be part of justice. The register of damage and future compensation mechanism should receive full political, legal, and financial support, including those to use of frozen Russian assets in accordance with international law. Thank you very much for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sir John Whittingdale from the United Kingdom, followed by Mr. Pavel Slis from Poland. Sir Whittingdale, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to endorse everything said by my friend from Ukraine in the previous contribution, but I would also like to focus particularly on paragraphs 38 and 39 of a report relating to journalism and media freedom. Journalism and media freedom are an essential component of a free democratic society that is recognized in the European Convention of Human Rights in Article 10, in the Universal Declaration in Article 19. But it is particularly important today We are facing a concerted effort to influence elections through disinformation. I have visited Moldova to see the attempts by Russia to influence the election there. We've seen it in Armenia, we've seen it in Hungary. We've also seen it in well-developed democratic societies like Germany and France and in the UK. Most of it does emanate from Russia through the Internet Research Agency, which produces what are known as Kremlin bots, but that is now being amplified by artificial intelligence, with the result that some searches on large language models are producing findings which are basically drawing on Russian propaganda. The way to counter that is through objective, factual, professional journalism. We in the UK are proud of the role played in the BBC through the World Service, but other organisations like Reuters, AP, all play a vital role. But whilst the need for factual and independent journalism has never been greater, the climate is worse than ever. RSF produced the Press Freedom Index, which shows that world press freedom is at a 25-year low. Over half the world's countries now fall into the category of difficult or very serious challenges to independent journalism. Some of the countries are obvious: China, Iran, North Korea, but it is also in Europe. Last year, the Safety of Journalists platform recorded the deaths of 53 journalists and media professionals in Europe. In Ukraine, first-person view drones have targeted journalists so that wearing a jacket with the word press on it is no longer a protection. It is now a target for Russian assassination. Journalists in the occupied territories in Ukraine have been imprisoned. One, Victoria Roshina's body was returned to Ukraine, having obviously been tortured. And in Russia itself, the last remaining independent media outlets have now been closed down. The internet has been shut down, and the foreign agents laws have been used to suppress all attempts to report independently. Press freedom is under threat like never before, and yet it is needed like never before, and therefore I strongly welcome that recognition in the resolution and urge for its support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Paweł Slis from Poland, followed by Ms. Eka Sepashvili from Georgia. Mr. Slis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and dear colleagues. At the very outset, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the work of the reporter, Ms. Karin Oderbrink. In my view, she has carried out an exceptionally thorough and thoughtful assessment, addressing in depth a wide range of issues within the human dimension, a pillar of our organization mission. And in today's difficult and challenging reality, perhaps its most vital one. Currently, principles of our organization, including the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, are being profoundly challenged. Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine has upended European security, and its consequences continue to reverberate across the region and beyond. The widespread and systematic violation committed against the Ukraine population have been documented in numerous independent expert reports, including those prepared under OSCE Moscow mechanism. Russia increasingly relies on hybrid methods to undermine democratic societies. Disinformation campaign and cyber attacks are designed to polarize our societies and erodate trust in democratic institutions. I would like to ensure that Poland remains firmly committed to multilateralism, international law, and the principles that underpin our shared security. We believe that only through a rules-based international order can we safeguard peace, democracy, and respect for human rights. On this occasion, I would like to inform you that the Polish delegation has submitted 5 amendments to the report. I hope they will meet with your approval and help ensure that the certain paragraphs of this already very strong text resonate even more powerful. Thank you very much for this report.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Ms. Eka Sepashvili from Georgia, followed by Mr. Pavlo Frolov from Ukraine. Ms. Sepashvili, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, let me highlighting that today all countries globally we are facing security challenges that harms democratic development and human rights protections of many individuals. And I'm a little bit surprised that the Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions did not even mention the situation in regards of humanitarian position and humanitarian condition and human rights protection of Georgian citizens in the occupied territories of Georgia, occupied by the Russian Federation. So I think this is a question to be raised everywhere, in every resolution, in every report. And let me stress now on the paragraph of this report 20, which concern Georgia, and particularly the Moscow mechanism, so-called Moscow mechanism, which contains many false information. And even I can argue that the author of this Moscow mechanism report herself confessed that he had very little time to prepare a proper report, and her some facts and arguments are not verified clearly, and she was relied on unverified sources. So in this regard, I'm very much surprised that the report is used to stress some situation in Georgia which is not proved by the arguments and proved by the real fact. On the other hand, which we can declare, and you are stressing about democratic backslide, some restrictions on fundamental freedoms and judicial independence, and so on. On all these items, other international reportings, other international ratings are underlining the good position Georgia holds. So I call author and people who are working on such kind of preparations to be more careful and take into consideration all information that regards democratic development in Georgia and the situation in regards of judicial independence, administrative and criminal measures in violations of internationally binding human rights obligations that are fully corresponds the international level and international criteria, and which Georgia is respect highly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Pavlo Frolov from Ukraine, followed by Mr. Armando Grave from Portugal. Mr. Frolov, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Ukraine expresses its appreciation to Rapporteur Karina Oderbrink for the comprehensive report and draft resolution presented to our committee. Russia's war of aggression is the most direct and destructive assault of international law and the Helsinki principles in the history of our organization. We particularly welcome the report's clear recognition that Ukraine must remain central to the work of the Parliamentary Assembly. We also welcome the unequivocal language contained in the draft resolution condemning Russia's grave violation of international humanitarian and human rights law, demanding the withdrawal of Russian forces from the entire internationally recognized territory of Ukraine, and addressing the unlawful detention of civilians, the torture and killing of prisoners of war, and deportation of Ukrainian children, and the destruction of Ukraine's cultural heritage. The figure contained in the report unfortunately reflect only a fraction of the human cost of Russia's aggression and are already being overtaken by the continuing escalation of Russian attacks. In May alone, the United Nations recorded more than 2,000 civilians casualties in Ukraine, the highest monthly total in 4 years. Russia continues to deliberately strike residential buildings, hospitals, energy facilities, railway infrastructure, and emergency responders. Ukraine supports the draft resolution and proposes that its humanitarian provisions be strengthened in several areas to more protect the rights of victims. Those amendments are about the rights of victims. International law recognizes the victims of serious violations have the right of full and effective reparation. For millions of Ukrainians affected by Russia's war of aggression, this right cannot remain merely a legal principle. It must become a practical reality. Our amendments will call on participating states to strengthen lawful mechanisms that can help secure such reparation. It recognizes that accountability also has a financial dimension and that fines and confiscated assets recovered from those responsible for sanction violation or sanction circumvention can contribute to restoring justice for victims. And another, we will ask the committee to ensure the principle of non-deterioration of the health and conditions of detention of OSCE staff, Mr. Shabanov, Mr. Petrov, Mr. Holda, and to guarantee regular monitoring of their state, including specifically in the context of negotiations on establishing a monitoring mechanism, and also to prevent any decisions or agreement that would instrumentalize OSCE staff to serve the Russian Federation political objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Frolov.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Armando Grey from Portugal, followed by Mr. Taco Van Popta from Canada. Mr. Grey, the floor is yours.
Senhor Presidente, senhoras e senhores parlamentários, antes de nada, les pido desculpa por mi español, y soy portugués. Los derechos humanos constituyen el fundamento del orden jurídico internacional y de la dignidad inherente a todo ser humano. Sin embargo, su efectividad depende de la existencia de instituciones democráticas sólidas, del Estado de Derecho, de la separación de poderes, de la libertad de expresión, del derecho a la vida y del acceso a la justicia. Sin estos pilares, los derechos humanos dejan de ser garantías efectivas y se convierten en meras proclamaciones. Es precisamente por ello que merece nuestra mayor preocupación la conclusión del informe que hoy debatimos, cuando afirma que los principios de la OCDE afrontan una creciente erosión caracterizada por la concentración de poder, el debilitamiento de las elecciones y de los tribunales para consolidar regímenes que se apartan de los valores democráticos. Esta erosión se manifiesta de forma especialmente grave cuando deriva de violaciones sistemáticas del derecho internacional y de los derechos humanos. Entre estas violaciones, el informe destaca la deportación y el traslado forzoso de más de 19.000 niños. Estos actos vulneran de manera flagrante la Convención sobre Derechos del Niño, que protege el derecho a la identidad, a la familia y a la protección contra traslados ilícitos. Ningún Estado puede permanecer indiferente cuando los niños son privados de sus familias, de su identidad, de su nacionalidad y de su futuro. La protección de los niños en los conflictos armados no es una opción política, es una obligación jurídica internacional. Por ello, debemos condenar de manera inequívoca estas violaciones, exigir el regreso inmediato y seguro de todos los niños deportados, apoyar todos los mecanismos internacionales de responsabilización y reafirmar que el respeto de los derechos humanos, la democracia y el Estado de Derecho constituyen la base indispensable de la paz, de la seguridad en Europa y en el mundo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Tako Van Popta from Canada, followed by Ms. Lizit Galestian from Armenia. Mr. Van Popta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Esteemed colleagues, I'm pleased to address you today to highlight an issue in Ms. Oderbrink's report. Her report underscores a concern that resonates strongly with me. Democracy and democratic institutions are increasingly under threat in the OSCE region. As she notes, quote, technological advances, including artificial intelligence, are increasingly used to manipulate information, spread disinformation, and interfere in our democratic processes. And colleagues, Canada is not immune to this reality. In its report on the 2025 federal election, Elections Canada concluded that threats to the electoral process are multifaceted and may include cyber attacks, foreign interference, and the use of misinformation, often targeting diaspora communities within our borders. Canada has a history of concerns around foreign interference in our elections at the local level, at the national level, and even at the party candidate nomination level. After such concerns were expressed in 2019 and 2021, the Canadian government established a public inquiry into foreign interference and appointed Madam Justice Hague as a commissioner. She stated in her report that trust in Canada's democratic institutions has been shaken, and it is imperative to restore it, close quote. She underlined that Canada must respond to, quote, attempts at foreign interference with measures and mechanisms to better deter, detect, and counter them, close quote. Now, colleagues, with an aim to better detect, deter, and counter foreign interference, I want to highlight recommendation number 68 in the report, which calls on OSCE participating states to adopt and strengthen legislation, policies, and regulatory frameworks to prevent and counter the spread of disinformation, information manipulation, and propaganda. But I would add this proviso. Such government initiatives designed to protect our citizens must not themselves undermine the very democratic institutions that we aim to protect: freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of the press, and the freedom to participate in our democratic processes. In this digital age with AI, artificial intelligence, deepfakes, and the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation, finding the right balance between the protection of our democratic institutions and defending our citizens, the freedom of our citizens, is one of this generation's big challenges. Are we equal to that challenge? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Lilith Galestian from Armenia, followed by Mr. Mahmoud Faramand from Norway. Ms. Galestian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, each year we are discussing the state of human rights and democracy, and each year the picture is becoming more troubling. As the report rightly stated, instead of strengthened cooperation, we are witnessing a widening gap between agreed standards and their implementation in practice. This is not simply an emotional disappointment, but a serious concern about our ability to restore trust and to acknowledge our failures. For the past 4 years, I have consistently raised two vital issues: the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh committed by Azerbaijan and the democratic backsliding in Armenia. At our annual session in Porto, I proposed sending an international mission to Baku to monitor the sham trials of former political leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh and to assess the ongoing erosion of Armenian cultural heritage. Unfortunately, the proposal was not supported. By failing to act, we allowed Azerbaijan to continue its violations. Today, at least 19 Armenians, including Ruben Vartanyan, Baku Sahakyan, Arkady Lukasyan, David Ishkhanyan, David Manukyan, and others, remain unlawfully detained in Baku. They continue to face torture and inhuman treatment, while even the International Red Cross has been denied access. This is not an isolated injustice, but part of a broader policy that included the blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh, the forced displacement of its indigenous population, the destruction of Armenian cultural heritage, and the continued promotion of the so-called Western Azerbaijan, a state-sponsored aggressive narrative used to advance territorial claims against Armenia. By failing to respond, we weaken the very standards that form the foundation of OSCE. Unfortunately, Armenia is facing serious democratic challenges of its own. International organizations are expressing concerns about the concentration of power and the weakening of democratic institutions. Recent parliamentary elections were often portrayed as a geopolitical contest, while the majority of the voters rejected further concessions, the crimes against democracy, the rising dictatorship, political persecutions, unlawful attacks on Armenian Apostolic Church. Dear colleagues, our responsibility does not end with documenting or ignoring these developments. Therefore, I call on the Assembly to closely monitor the democratic decline in Armenia, to demand the immediate release of all unlawfully detained Armenian prisoners of war in Baku, to ensure the protection of the cultural heritage of Nagorno-Karabakh, and to reaffirm the right of return of its indigenous population. It's not simply a moral imperative, but a legal obligation. Let us restore trust in the principles we are committed to uphold. Thank you.
The next speaker on the list is Mr. Mahmoud Farahmand from Norway, followed by Mr. Levan Makhashvili from Georgia. Mr. Farahmand, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues, 50 years after Helsinki, we are not defending a legacy. We are defending a system under live fire. This report and resolution describes a world where impunity is no longer the exception, but the method, and is upon us to be honest about its origins. Democratic backsliding rarely happens in a vacuum. Time and again, it is a product of deliberate external interference. Hostile totalitarian states funding disinformation and exploiting democratic openness to weaken democracies from within. When we treat backsliding as purely domestic, we let the states orchestrating it operate without consequence. I also want to name what should never become routine in these types of reports, and that is the humanitarian toll. Civilians do not choose conflict, yet how the forces around them treat them varies sharply. Ukraine, under sustained Russian aggression, with support from Iran, has organized its defense around protecting its civilian population. By contrast, Iran, their proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, have made a deliberate use of civilians as shields, a documented feature of their operations. This is the difference between a state defending its people and forces that treat their own population as expendable cover. Democratic backsliding and armed aggression are not two separate chapters in this report. They're connected, often driven by the same external hand. As the rapporteur said herself in her speech, without democracy, there can be no security. I could not agree more. A state that jails its own opposition at home is more likely to threaten its neighbors abroad. Human rights are not a soft add-on to hard security. They are a leading indicator of it. With regard to the Islamic Republic, Iran-led plots and attacks on European soil have been rising for decades. And since the outbreak of the war in the Middle East, our own security services have recognized a further spike on our own soil within the OSCE area. This is not a distant conflict anymore. This is already testing our internal security. I have to add another point. In January this year, the Islamic Republic killed tens of thousands of peaceful protesters in the streets. On Ukraine, the OSCE officials, Shabanov, Petrov, and Golda, have been held illegally since 2022. Their continued detention is a direct challenge to the protection of credentials that this are meant to guarantee them. Before I close, let me also say this. Honesty must cut both ways. Those who level accusations at open democracies such as Sweden should be equally honest about the rights they deny their own citizens at home. We did not inherit Helsinki to wash it fade. We inherited the responsibility to give it teeth through our voices, our votes, and our persistence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Mr. Mahashvili from Georgia, followed by Ms. Ruth Marianne Hoppe from Norway. Ms. Mahashvili, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Rapporteur, for the presented document. 34 out of 57 countries did not support the invocation of the Moscow mechanism on Georgia. That's roughly 60%, including the United States. Georgia cooperated with the OSCE in good spirit, but obviously we cannot accept the findings due to the obvious reasons explained numerous times in various or relevant OSCE formats. The presented draft resolution provides extremely alarming tendency of portraying the provisions of the Moscow Mechanism report as hard evidence in a form of fact and assertion, while the report itself highlights that these are only allegations. For instance, the most concerning wording is in paragraph 20, stating that violence, quote, reached the threshold of torture, end of quote, while the report itself never contains such formulation. Even the paragraph 55 of this very draft resolution states that these are only allegations. So in order to avoid purposeful misinterpretation or information manipulation, may I kindly ask you to delete this particular sentence in paragraph 20 as it deviates from the Moscow Mechanism report wording and is a political interpretation of the report finding. Regarding the so-called democratic backsliding, let me also be very clear. Legal regulations represent the only legitimate instrument available to any sovereign country, including Georgia, for protecting its electoral processes, political system, and socio-economic integrity from foreign malign interference. A small country with strategic location and complex neighborhood dynamics has every reason to establish legal guardrails. If anybody dislikes a particular law, the democratic and constructive response is never to bypass or undermine the legal framework through confrontation, external coercion, or amplifying domestic unrest. The proper response would be to debate or to challenge the law's specific provisions based on their legal merits. For those who don't know, the transparency legislation is discussed in the Constitutional Court of Georgia and the European Court of Human Rights. This is the right way to follow and not to weaponize OSCE PA or related institutions for short-term political headlines, because it will ultimately hurt, damage the reputation of OSCE PA itself. So we strongly recommend to avoid political labeling and let the courts judge them on legal merits. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Ruth Marianne Hoppe from Norway, followed by Mr. Igor Chiriak from Moldova. Mrs. Hoppe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to thank Ms. Odebrink for an important and timely report. One issue that deserves particular attention is human trafficking. The report highlights the growing threats of trafficking in human beings across the OSCE area, where women, children, migrants, and refugees are especially vulnerable. Norway recently adopted a new national strategy against human trafficking, which strengthens cooperation between authorities and civil society, improves protection and assistance for victims, and enhances efforts to investigate and prosecute those responsible. Human trafficking is not only a serious crime against individuals, it also undermines the rule of law, public trust, and our collective security. As parliamentarians, we must support a victim-centered approach. Victims of trafficking need access to protection, healthcare, legal assistance, and opportunities to rebuild their lives. At the same time, perpetrators must be held accountable through effective national and international cooperation. The human consequences of war must also remain at the center of our discussions here in Hague and our respective countries. In Ukraine, enforced disappearances, the deportation of children, and the large number of missing persons reminds us why accountability and documentation are so important. The report rightly addresses these issues and highlights the needs to uphold international law and support accountability efforts. And finally, I would like to emphasize the importance of free and independent media. Across the OSCE region, we continue to see journalists facing harassment, intimidation, detention, and restriction on their work, and this is deeply concerning. Freedom of expression and access to reliable information is fundamental democratic values. Independent journalists play a crucial role in exposing corruption, documenting human rights abuses, and holding those in power accountable. Protecting media freedom is all about protecting democracy. Mr. Chair, human trafficking, accountability for violations committed in Ukraine, and media freedom may seem like different issues. In reality, they are closely connected. They all concern human dignity, the rule of law, and our ability to defend democratic societies. And for these reasons, we strongly support the work in advancing human rights, democratic resilience, and fundamental freedoms throughout our region. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Igor Chiriac from Moldova, followed by Mr. Angelo Iacono from Canada. Mr. Chiriac, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. Firstly, I would like to thank Madame Odebrink for such comprehensive report and balanced resolution. The defense of democracy began long before election day. It begins with protecting citizens from manipulation, defending free media, safeguarding the rule of law, and ensuring that people can make informed choices. For Moldova, democracy is not only a political system, it is our strongest defense against foreign aggression. Over the last 2 years, our country has faced an unprecedented campaign of hybrid attacks. Russia has attempted to influence our elections through illegal financing, disinformation, cyber attacks, and coordinated manipulation on social media. Artificial intelligence and opaque algorithms have made these attacks faster, cheaper, and more difficult to detect. This is not simply misinformation. It is a deliberate attempt to undermine democratic institutions without firing a single shot. At the same time, we continue to live next to Russia's brutal war against Ukraine. Every missile launched against Ukrainian cities reminds us that military aggression and information warfare are two sides of the same strategy. The humanitarian consequences are enormous. This is why democracy must also mean resilience. We need stronger cooperation to protect elections, expose foreign information manipulation, strengthen independent journalism, and improve digital literacy, especially among young people. Freedom of expression must always be protected, but freedom cannot become a weapon used by authoritarian regimes to destroy democracy from within. Our responsibility is to defend democracy in our institutions, our media, and our societies. Only together can we preserve the principles that unite the OSCE community. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Mr. Angelo Iacono from Canada, followed by Ms. Sevinch Fatalieva from Azerbaijan. Mr. Iacono, the floor is yours.
Chair, Vice Chair, and Rapporteur, parliamentary colleagues. To begin, I would like to thank the Rapporteur, Mrs. Odebrink, for preparing a robust and thoughtful report for this committee's consideration. I would like to focus my remarks on two fundamental freedoms that are essential to a democratic society: the freedoms of expression and association, rights that Mrs. Odebrink's report notes are under growing pressure. Indeed, the Free Speech Organization, Article 19, found in its 2025 Global Expression Report that the level of freedom of expression has declined in more than 70 countries over the last decade. In a similar vein, the 2026 World Press Freedom Index issued by Reporters Without Borders revealed that press freedom is at a 25-year low. This metric is significant because undermining journalists and media workers also undermines the public's access to reliable information. As well, our information ecosystem itself is confronting new and rapidly evolving risks, in part due to the exploitation of digital dynamics. The OSCE representative of freedom of the media recently warned that the landscape of information is transforming in ways that are reshaping public discourse, eroding trust in democratic institutions, and straining the resilience of independent media. Meanwhile, the rapporteur's report warns that arbitrary detentions, politically motivated prosecutions, and growing constraints on civil society are steadily undermining civic engagement in our region. Canada, like other countries in the OSCE region, is not immune to these pressures. Unifor, a union which represents more than 10,000 media workers in Canada, reported in October 2025 that threats, harassments, and legal intimidation against journalists in Canada are growing, particularly for journalists reporting on polarizing topics. The Chief Electoral Office of Canada issued a report in 2024 that raised concerns about how artificial intelligence can be used in our information environments to interfere in democratic processes if proper safeguards are not applied. We know that throughout history, the ability to speak openly, to voice dissent, to create art, and to report the news, these are acts have moved our societies forward. These are freedoms recognized globally, including in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Article 19 of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. Put simply, these freedoms form the foundation of democracy and further our shared security. Dear colleagues, it is our responsibility of strengthening protections for expression, including media freedom in law and in practice, and to create responsive regulations that will alleviate harm, uphold public trust, and encourage full participation in public life. I commend the reporter's conclusions that as parliamentarians we have a responsibility at this critical moment to not only reaffirm our commitment to these values, but to act on them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Sevinch Fatalieva from Azerbaijan, followed by Mr. Barry Ward from Ireland. Ms. Fatalieva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, human rights are most meaningful not in declarations, but in people's everyday lives, in a family ability to live without fear, a child's access to education, and the community's opportunity to recover, develop, and look to the future with confidence. Wherever these conditions are absent, our common commitments remain incomplete. I would like to thank Madam Rapporteur for an excellent and timely report. It reminds us that democracy, human rights, and humanitarian issues cannot be separated from international law and the shared principles that have served for decades as the foundation of security and cooperation across the OSCE area. Today, our region continues to face armed conflicts, humanitarian crises, forced displacement, and growing polarization. These challenges test not only our institution, but also our commitment to the principles that unite us. They remind us that lasting security cannot be achieved by political or military means only. It requires respect for international law, effective institutions, protection of human rights, and sustained dialogue. Democracy depends on strong institutions. Human rights depend on effective protection. Humanitarian action depends on solidarity. All three ultimately depend on respect for international law. This is why our shared principles must be applied consistently, impartially, and in good faith. Only such an approach can strengthen trust among participating states and reinforce confidence in our common institutions. Dear colleagues, for Azerbaijan, these principles are not abstract concepts. They served as a practical guidance for building sustainable peace and translating international commitment into tangible improvements in people's life. Today, Azerbaijan is demonstrating that post-conflict recovery is not only about rebuilding infrastructure. It's about restoring human dignity, strengthening communities, and creating opportunities for people to live in peace and security. Mr. Chairman, while some of our distinguished colleagues continue to describe yesterday here, Azerbaijan prefers to work on tomorrow. The region today has a genuine opportunity for lasting peace, and that is where our attention should be. We remain committed to advancing the normalization process with Armenia. We believe that dialogue, mutual respect, and full adherence to the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and internationally recognized borders provide the strongest foundation for lasting peace, human security, and regional cooperation. Dear colleagues, democracy, human rights, and international law are not separate agendas. Together, they create the foundation for sustainable peace, security, and development. Let us continue to ensure that our shared principles are translated into practical actions that improves people's lives, strengthen cooperation, and reinforces trust across the OSCE area. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Barry Ward from Ireland, followed by Mr. Ulrik Nilsson from Sweden. Mr. Ward, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to say that there are many countries within this Assembly who don't agree on many issues. And sometimes some of those countries are called out for particular human rights abuses. But I want to welcome this report and congratulate Ms. Soderbrink on what she has done in putting together this amount of work and the conclusions and the resultant draft resolution. I think, however, there is none of us who is perfect in the field of human rights. No country has a blemish-free record, and no country has always done the right thing when it comes to its own citizens or other countries. What we are here to do is to discuss those issues, and I feel, listening to some contributors, that while some countries do come in maybe for more criticism than others, it cannot be about the sensitivities that those people have. And I was listening to some of the contributors whose countries I think have questionable human rights records, particularly Belarus. The suggestion in response to the report that the rapporteur should now go back to Sweden and look at Sweden's human rights records is not the answer. All of us must look into our own countries, and where there are imperfections, we must address them. And when I think of Belarus, I think of an Irish flight, a Ryanair flight from Athens to Vilnius in May 2021 that was forced to land in Minsk when a journalist and activist, Roman Potashkevich, was taken off that plane and arrested. That is an unacceptable breach of human rights. And to accept it is to start to solve it and to start to address it. If we deny these things ever happen, or seek to put the blame on others, or seek to redirect the attention, we will never resolve the issues. In that respect, I also want to address paragraph 52 of the draft resolutions and the strong support that is expressed in there for investigators into crimes committed by Russia in its war of aggression against Ukraine. I absolutely support this. However, the resolution is incomplete because at the moment, another country in this Assembly has placed sanctions on the International Criminal Court prosecutors and judges because of arrest warrants that they have independently and, in my view, correctly issued against actors in the war that's currently happening in the Middle East. Not against one side, but against both sides, against generals in the Israeli Defense Forces and against terrorists within the Hamas organization. We must also be willing to look at those large countries who have placed sanctions on the International Criminal Court, which is an independent and objectively correct international organization that deserves our support, but is now being sanctioned by a large international country in the United States. It has resulted in other members of this Assembly having to take its information technology systems away from American companies because they have been sanctioned themselves. We must be complete and full, and we must also accept the criticisms that are legitimately made against our own countries.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on the list is Mr. Ulrich Nilsson, followed by Ms. Maria Karapetyan from Armenia. Mr. Nilsson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. There is a story about a man visiting Poland on the communist time, asking a man on the street, "Are you a communist?" And the man answered, "I'm acting, not believing." And then he asked, "Are you a Catholic?" And the man answered, "I'm a believer, not acting." And I think this is important for this area to say that we need both to be able to act as democratic people, but also to believe in democracy. And therefore we have juridical rules, we have laws, we have institutions to make us act correctly. But we also need to support and to have the opinion to support the believing in democracy, in human rights, in humanitarian issues. And that means that we as parliamentarians must stand for the open debate. We must stand for the values that have created democracy. We must be able to welcome all opinions and openness. We must accept the free press because due to discussion, we can learn more, we can develop, and we can be better. We as parliamentarians need to show respect, obviously against others, but also against each other, and not to throw arguments, but actually to meet in the open debate. We need, so to say, to use a slogan, we need to walk the talk. And to use another slogan, the proof of the pudding is eating it. And therefore, we need to be aware of the problems we have in different cases. It may be minorities, it may be people under occupation, it may be opposition that are suppressed in some countries. Because it is like one former prime minister in Sweden said, it's a good country where you without risk can say that the government is bad. And this is something we must be able to stand up for, because otherwise we can't fight the fight for democracy. It can be also about LGBT groups, it can be a number of different areas, but we need to lift their problems in the public and show example. So for me, this report is a balance between institutional structure and support for actions. It's about to support and make public of those that are under pressure. But to the last point, it is our responsibilities as parliamentarians to stand up for the principles, to take the debate, to actually be champions of democracy and not surrender that fight. And to that, I welcome all the members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Maria Karapetyan from Armenia, followed by Mr. Yaroslav Yurishin from Ukraine. Ms. Karapetyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, on June 7, Armenia completed a new cycle of democratic renewal, parliamentary elections. In this period, Armenia faced many of the challenges we talk about in this parliamentary assembly: disinformation and misinformation, AI-generated misleading content, vote buying, and attempts at foreign interference in our electoral processes. Despite these challenges, our people counterbalanced these malicious phenomena with their vote, and our state institutions acted swiftly to protect the integrity of our elections. Armenia held free, fair, and transparent elections. Equally important were the political agendas that were put to a test in these elections. Armenian people voted for peace and prosperity, for freedom and democracy. Armenia and Azerbaijan will continue to live in peace through direct, unmediated engagement, building trust, engaging in trade, and developing regional infrastructure and connectivity. To conclude, I would like to thank all of you colleagues that joined the election observation mission that was led by Farah and Yavrosima. Thank you so much for all your hard work and your professional assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I now give the floor to Mr. Yaroslav Yurishin from Ukraine. I want to inform you this is the last speech for today. We will continue with the debate on draft resolution tomorrow morning as 12:30 is approaching and we cannot have interpretation after that, as well as there are many side events are scheduled at 12:30, including gender lunch. So, Mr. Yurishin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, dear Chairman. We fully support this report and draft resolution. I am, as head of Committee for Freedom of Speech in Ukrainian Parliament, stressing crucial necessity of mass media, of journalists, and their work to save our democracy. We understand how crucial this work is, but Putin in the same time understand this too. Because of that, Russian troops attacking journalists day by day. Now we have killed at least 132 journalists. 12 of them was killed in time of reporting. 15 of them was killed in civilian area by rockets or missiles. And we do understand that it's not final numbers. At least 26 journalists now in captivity as civilian journalists, not combatants, and due to weakness of international humanitarian law, we don't have appropriate mechanism to release them as quick as we need. Victoria Roshina was killed 2 years ago in the age of 27 years old, and we still don't have appropriate information how it happened. Russia don't give any information, not to relatives, not to our prosecutor office. Due to that, we create a special investigation commission for investigate crime, parliamentarian commission for investigate crime Russia against Ukrainian and international media, because not only Ukrainians journalist was killed. Due to that, we invite all of you to our side event, where we present our report and full understanding that only joint action can help save who save our democracy, our journalists. And I finished my speech with one demand. I hope we all met Vladimir Putin in Hague in a process of accusation for international tribunal. We hope that accusation will have part for crimes against civilian and crime against journalists. Thanks for your report. We hope that together we have mechanism to release all civilian hostages and stop this cruel war. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So with this, we conclude the work of the committee for today. The plan is for tomorrow is to continue with the remarks, with the speeches on the draft resolution tomorrow in the morning, and then we will proceed to the amendments. See you all tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the morning. Thank you very much.